listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk.
Number 378.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Outdoor Station with me, your host, Bob Cartwright. And welcome to the first of a series of 12 Wild Camp podcasts. If you haven't caught up with the previous podcast, we had a little bit of a review of where we were and what's been happening over the last 12 months or so, and realising that perhaps the podcasts that we've been producing and the videos were perhaps lacking a little bit of reality and getting out and keeping things simple. It's been a while since I've done a trip type support or sort of an audio diary, and at the moment, looking around the internet as you do, various blogs and forums and so on, wild camping seems to be the thing of the moment that people are talking about. A lot of people want to know what's it all about, what's it like, you know, are they brave enough to do it, the experience and so on. And this was all came to fruition a couple of weeks back when Rose took a friend of hers wild camping who had never been before, and it was on her bucket list. And so they headed off to the Black Mountain. And afterwards we said, well, really I should start to correlate some of these trips, perhaps do a series on wild camping over 12 months, one a month, obviously going through the 12 months in all the different weathers, different experiences, different places, etc, etc. But the dilemma, when actual push came to shove, the dilemma was where to go and what to take, especially on the early trips. So, as it happens, I put the comment out on the good old Tinternet, and we've had quite a lot of responses because I did ask if anybody wanted to join me in any of these adventures. We're going to do a variety of them, really. So bivvy based, lightweight if possible, or lighter anyway, tarps, hammocks, perhaps with push bikes, perhaps with our new pet dog Pip, and anybody else that wanted to join us, really. And I had quite a few notes and feedback which I'll come on to later. But on the Outdoor Station Facebook page, do join if you can. It's a private group, but just make your application and we'll click the button. Esther Saunders made a fairly good suggestion about keeping it simple, because it's easy when you've got experience in doing this type of thing to take it for granted that everybody's got the basics covered. And Esther made a good point about just go 5 miles from home and then 10 miles from home next time, and so on and so forth. So, I'm not sure if the wind's blowing the microphone now. So, let's turn my back to the wind. So, yes, this played on my mind a bit. And I went through my various boxes of gear. Naturally, being in the industry as well as being a bit of a gear geek, I've got a few bivvy bags. Probably about a dozen or so. I've got more sleeping bags, would you believe? But anyway, in my routing around, I found my very first bivvy bag, which was an ex-Army, I think, Gore-Tex one. I picked it up second-hand somewhere along the way, and that was my first bivvy bag. So I thought, well, this is probably how people might start. Let's go and keep it simple. And then whilst routing through the terrible loft, which is full of sleeping bags, I found my first, should we say, lightweight bag, which was a Vango 300, I think it was. A little down bag which I've used a few times on adventure races and crunches down quite small. And so I pulled that out as well. And taking Zesta's comments in heart and mind, what I've decided to do was, obviously, as we live in Malvern, and we're very, very lucky to have the Malvern Hills on our doorstep, literally, I thought, okay, let's keep it simple, let's go on the Malvern Hills. Now, that might seem a bit boring to the experienced people who are probably listening to this, but hopefully you'll listen and follow it through with me and understand my logic, because what I'd like to do is really touch on a lot of the basics that one needs to consider when wild camping, and try and help people over their fears, really. So let me describe what's been happening. So it's about, what time is it? It's about 9:30. Where's the light button? No, it's gone 10 o'clock. It's just gone 10 o'clock. I'm just heading up to Worcestershire Beacon. I've been on the hills for a couple of hours, starting over at British Camp, which is halfway along, and just gently walked along the peaks to where I am currently heading north. The weather has been remarkable, really, in the sense that the forecast tonight is it's going to be 10 degrees, which is ridiculous for October. And apparently tomorrow it's going to be 20 degrees, so it'll be shorts and t-shirts again. It's ridiculous. So I was expecting much worse weather this month, but in actual fact it's been quite good. So I've meandered my way, as I say, along the ridge, and every time I dip down between peaks, there's a waft of suburbia comes my way. People have got their wood stoves going now, so a waft of wood smoke, which is lovely. There's the pub at Witch Cutting. There's a waft of beer that is extremely tempting, but I've managed to resist. And there are odd sounds of suburbia, children having a misspent youth with occasional fireworks and bangers, as it's bonfire night, fireworks night in a few days' time. In keeping with my promise, this of course is the 30th of October 2014, so I'm just within my first month. I don't know where the month's gone, but here we are, we're out doing it. So as I climb the peak up the well-trodden path, and the peak isn't excessive by any stretch of the imagination, it's only 425 metres, so it's not even a mountain. But as I head my way up to the beacon, the mist is in fact clinging to the top of the hills, but it's not really cold. I've just got a base layer on, and my what have I got? Montane halo jacket, the stretch one, and I'm roasting, which is most unexpected. Now, one of the secrets, of course, of a successful wild bivvy camp is not to arrive too hot and sticky where you're going to camp, because the amount of moisture that you'll be giving off throughout your body will obviously create a massive amount of potential condensation inside the bag itself. Combine that with the fact that the night is going to be relatively still, we're into the first dilemma and the first technical issue of bivvying, and that is, it's always better, and you get better results, if the inside of the bivvy bag and the outside of the bivvy bag have quite a different atmosphere between them. In other words, to pump the moisture through, get the Gore-Tex working, or the Event, or whichever material it is you're using effectively, it's better not to have very pleasant, balmy nights. Otherwise the moisture can't go anywhere. So I'm expecting a little bit of a problem on that score, and so we'll see how we'll handle that. So let's just talk about the bivvy bag for first. As I say, bought it from an army surplus shop. As I say, I understood it to be Gore-Tex. It's the mummy style with the draw cord hood, and I thought that would work quite well, really, considering where I am, because it enables me to pull the hood up around my shoulders and prevent any drafts down my neck I've recently had a trip to the chiropractors and they've been working on my back and told me not to get it cold. So that would make sense for me to do that if I could. I see the lights of Malvernshire are dwindling away through the mist now. I've got Malvern over to my left, and I've got Malvern over to my right, and Herefordshire and the dark side that goes to Wales over on my left. And the view from up here normally is sensational, but it's now getting really, really spooky and misty. And although I'm not using a head torch, I'm trying to get my night sight, night vision clued in. I can probably see about, say 5 metres with any sort of clarity to make the shapes out. After that, it's just an eerie mist. Very Sherlock Holmes. Oops, I'll cover where I've put my feet as well. Well, the paths are fairly well trodden, so I'm not expecting to fall flat on my face, which is suitably good, not embarrassing. What else have I brought with me? Well, I haven't brought anything really. I planned, as I said, to keep this simple, and the reason for that is that the first time that I did bivvying was probably very similar to this. I wasn't necessarily thinking of it being a bivvy in a wild camp, more as a way of watching the sunrise on Midsummer's night. And so, using the equipment I've mentioned, a bunch of us years ago camped out on the hills to do that, and just had a few hours sleep between sunset and sunrise, and it was beautiful. It was a magical time. So hence the reason I thought I'll use the same equipment again and see how we get on, really. See if it still works after all those years in the loft. Well, as you can probably hear now, the wind is picking up as I'm starting to get a bit more exposed. I guess the problem I've got in some respects is familiarity. I'm fairly familiar with the hills, having lived here for 25, 30 odd years, and so consequently all the times I've been over the top, it says familiar and falling down a hole, the number of times I've been over the top, you've always thought, that was a nice little space to hunker down if you had to. And of course I've been up here in all types of weathers, snow as well as glorious sunny days. So part of me is tempted to have a look at the beacon. Now anybody that's been to the Worcestershire Beacon, well, as I say, it's only 400 odd metres high, will know that there's a lot of exposed rock. And exposed rock, if there's one thing it is, and that is very cold, and as well as being quite lumpy and painful on the old back, which wouldn't keep my chiropractor very happy. There used to be a cafe at the top of the hills many years ago, and certainly when I was a youth it was there. However, one night some misspent youths got it in their head that it would make a very good bonfire, and sadly it's never been reinstated. But possibly it's a good thing. Stop the hills being too commercialised from that point of view. So I'm thinking either North Hill or the Beacon. Now North Hill is about half a mile, possibly a mile further on from the Beacon. It's more of a rounded tump than as any sort of distinct shape. And currently there's a lot of grazing going on the hills, and the people concerned have fenced off the animals in certain areas. Of course, it being dark and misty, I'm not too sure where that is. Not that I expect to be trampled on by rampant animals, more a case of I don't particularly want to lie down in animal doo-doo, or be troubled by any animals snuffling, wondering what this big green worm is. So that's something to take into account. So that's my dilemma. And as I say, it's gone 10 o'clock now, so hopefully in the next hour I'll find myself a spot which I think is acceptable. I'll obviously, if I can, take some photographs to show people exactly what was involved. The rest of the gear that I've got in the pack is I've just got a little 30 litre Innovate pack, which is a lovely pack, which I've had for a few years. And what have I got? I've got the sleeping bag, I've got the bivy bag obviously, I've got a short ProLite 3, I've got an inflatable sit mat, I've got some insulation should I need it, which I don't think I will, and obviously I've got waterproof trousers and bits like that, flask of tea, a couple of bars, head torch, podcast equipment, and that is about that. So there's no brew kit, there's no food, I'm not cooking any food. I've obviously used the facilities down Witch Cutting, there's some toilets there, so I use the facilities there, so I'm not anticipating needing to use the landscape in any way from that point of view, but I've got my toilet trowel with me in case there's a sudden emergency. Got to think about these things. And that is pretty well it. I've got no compass, no map. I know exactly where I am. As I say, I've been walking these hills for 30 odd years, and we're on the last little stretch up to the beacon right now. So I'm not too sure if the wind is going to make it impossible to hear me, so I'll do my best to shield the microphone, and certainly the wind's just picked up in this last few metres, as you can hear with my poles. Oh yeah, I've got a pair of walking poles, some of the Lecky Vario carbon poles. I always find, certainly at night walking, poles are absolutely vital. I've had a few stumbles and caught myself a couple of times when I wasn't using poles, and certainly I found them as useful tonight as I've found any time. It's always nice just to double check what you're heading into. As I say, keeping things simple, just so it's just a merino wool base layer, jacket, pair of terra pants, I've got some Innovate trail shoes, and that's about it really. So that's my introduction. Whoops, just hit the rocky patch. That's my introduction. I'm going to stop now as I just get to the top itself. In fact, no, I'll let you join me for that bit. Down in town, there's just the faintest halo glow of lights through the mist. Nothing on the Herefordshire side. That's as dark as anything. And so it looks like we've got the right sort of conditions, really. And that is not unpleasantly cold, but a fair breeze, which is fairly chilly, that will take away the moisture off the surface of the bivy bag. So all we have to do now is, now that where are we? Hang on a second. There's a stone path here, just here. Right, and there is the obelisk, just looming out of the mist. Now I'm just going to make my way across some very undulating, rocky path where it's all been exposed by the weather over the years. If you're not careful, you can twist an ankle or worse here. So I expect it to get very windy any second now. There you go. One. Whoa. Yep, a bit breezy. One obelisk. Marble with a topographic map at the top that shows you all the beautiful view around, except I can't see more than 5 metres. Okay, let's just head back down, whoops, where we came, get back onto that path. Poles are absolutely vital now. think I'm going to wander, as I indicated earlier on, down to North Hill and just see. I'm in the path. There's the path. I'm going to wander down to North Hill now and just see if the weather's a little more balanced down there. It's obviously very exposed, very cold. Well, not very cold, but it's certainly a lot colder than I am currently. Wind's definitely coming from the west to about 10 miles an hour. And as I say, the weather forecast tonight is mild, 10 degrees, obviously down at lower levels, so probably half that up here. So I need to find myself a nice little spot to bed down for the night. So when I do so, I shall switch you back on and we'll continue.
As you can hear, there was a stiff breeze at the top, so please forgive some of the quality of the recording throughout this podcast. However, I think it prudent and responsible to stop for a moment to discuss the legality of what I was doing that particular night and wild camping in general. Simply put, wild camping is illegal in the UK, except for two areas. In Scotland, where under the Land Reform Act of 2003, it is permissible with certain restrictions. This includes beyond the curtilage of houses and gardens, out of the sight of roads, away from crops and so on. The other place is Dartmoor, where the same kind of restrictions apply. Camping for 1 or 2 nights on open land on Dartmoor is perfectly acceptable, provided you choose your spot sensibly and don't pitch your tent on farmland or moorland enclosed by walls, on floodplains or on archaeological sites. Lightweight camping equipment should be used and large family frame tents should not be used. There's plenty of information on the internet relating to both, and in particular a map for Dartmoor showing the appropriate areas where you can and can't camp. However, they all share the same request that you are responsible for your own actions and to respect the interest of others, and more importantly, to care for the environment. On the Malvern Hills area, there's actually a bylaw stating no camping. So I was on very thin legal ice doing this trip. Well, was I camping or was I just waiting for sunrise in a bivvy bag? However, the most important rule, number 1, is to respect your surroundings and leave no trace. So please check out the Outdoor Station website related to this podcast and you'll see images of where I stayed and what kind of impact I made. Now this should be a priority for all wild campers, and it does break my heart when people abuse their surroundings. You see so much damage in images posted willingly across the net on Facebook and on social media, all falling under the guise of wild camping. So much so, and so much damage has been caused in Scotland since 2003. There's now a series of bans coming in, especially around Loch Lomond, where the abuse has taken place. If you just Google it, you'll see the effect that it's had and just what a few irresponsible people can do to such an area of beauty. So please, folks, think about minimum impact wherever you go, because the damage or marks that you leave behind will affect the future of people who want to follow in your footsteps and do wild camping responsibly. So next time you head out to do some wild camping, just consider, do you really need to have a big open campfire? Do you really need to have large tents and to virtually export some of the luxuries from home? Wild camping should be subtle, it should be low impact, and if at all possible, it should be virtually invisible.
I've made my way to the top of North Hill now, and I've got my back to the wind, which I guess you can probably hear. The wind seems to have changed slightly. Sadly, it was coming from the west, and now it's swung around a bit and it's coming from the south, so that means it's coming along the ridge of the hills. There's 2 rules basically to bivvying, certainly, and to wild camping. The first rule is the major rule, which is obviously leave no trace under any circumstances. No fire marks, no damaged foliage if you can, etc, etc. Obviously unless emergencies dictate. And the second one is, if at all possible, wake up with a view. And that is probably the 2 strongest rules really on a trip like this. Now, even though it's night time and I'm familiar, it's surprising how quickly that familiar changes into unsure as I've been wandering around. When I put the head torch on, it was just shining straight into a fog, and I couldn't see more than a foot. It was terrible, so I had to take the torch off my head and hold it down where my poles were so I could just light up the rocky, slippy sections that I sort of travelled over. So this is a bit disappointing because I was really looking forward to staying on here. But having said that, there's a lovely little gully just down from North Hill as you start to head back towards the beacon, and it's lovely and soft underfoot, firm ground but soft, and I'm sure I can find a little corner to duck out of the main part of the wind there and still have a reasonable view in the morning. It's only about 50 metres from where I am height wise, so I'm just going to head back up over the top and down to this gully and have a scout around and see if I can find somewhere. Thankfully, the fencing of the animals, the sheep and the cattle that the conservators have been doing and farmer using the facilities up here seems to have moved on. Last time I came up here, the North Hill was wired off. Not that I would stop you getting to it, it was just obviously that's where the animals were. But there's no sign of them, so that's good. So I'm going to head down to my gully and pick up again when we get down there. Right, what time is it now? It is 11 o'clock on the nail. I've taken a couple of pictures just to sort of show the gear, which is only a handful of bags, but I managed to come down to that gully I mentioned and find a spot which is just out of the wind, as in I'm ducked down behind a gorse bush basically, because the wind is gusting as it does. I've got the bivvy bag unrolled, I've got the sleeping mat pumped up. I am just getting the sleeping bag unpacked. I might have to forego the view tomorrow morning slightly, just out of practicality, as I'm going to keep wandering all around all night otherwise, looking for the perfect spot. As it's not raining, although rain is promised at some stage, I just want to get myself sorted while I can. I aim to keep my clothes on, including my jacket at the moment. As I say, you don't want to arrive and get into a bivvy too hot and sticky and clammy, but at the same time you don't want to be freezing cold. Now, one thing I have learned from experience is always take a plastic bag, would you believe, for your shoes or boots. I once had an experience when I was on top of the Mona Lea in Scotland. I took my boots off and put all my clothes on and got into my bivvy bag for an emergency camp because I wasn't too sure where I was, so I had to bed down, and my boots froze to the ground, and obviously trapping air by putting them in the plastic bag will prevent that, but it also helps that if it rains, getting your footwear wet is annoying, but the worst is if you've trodden into something in the darkness, and you don't want to be obviously enjoying that all night long. So, clothes on, into the sleeping bag, which is inside the bivvy bag, which is on top of the mat. As you can hear, the wind is gusting, which is just about right really for where I am. And what I've got to do is pull the layers underneath me. So I'm down the bottom of the bag and everything else is up at shoulder height. Right, so what am I doing with the rest of the stuff? Okay, everything else is going to be bagged away, just in case for some reason the weather obviously is dramatic during the night and I have to make a run for it. So I'm going to use my rucksack as a pillow, put it under my head. My shoes are kept in a plastic bag, will be beside me. Anything else that I take off or whatever during the night will be tucked in between the sleeping bag and the bivvy bag to one side, and hopefully during the night what I'll be doing is just checking the dampness on the inside of the bivvy bag every now and again with my hands to make sure I haven't got a build-up of condensation. So there's a bit of a fine juggling act when you're actually bivvying, in the sense that obviously you want to get out of the weather and keep as warm as you practically can, but at the same time you don't want to generate moisture inside your bag. But for the breathability to work, you need to have a good breeze, if possible, across the bag without it obviously making your trip miserable. And already, because I'm on a slope slightly, and already I've slipped down the mat and slipped down the bivvy bag. Anyway, it is 11:05 and it's time for bed buys, I think. I think it's going to rain during the night. The forecast was for a light rain, and then the mist probably lifting tomorrow morning. Sunrise is about 6:30. Hopefully I'm bound to be awake by then, and having a cup of tea, and if at all possible take a few pictures and perhaps do a bit more. If anything exciting happens during the night, I shall wake up the machine and talk to it. Let's hope I sleep well. I'll give you a report in the morning. That's about it. I'm going to go to bed. Night night, everyone.
While I'm having a doze there and settling down, I just thought I'd go through a few of the emails that I've received. As I said on the previous episode, we're hitting our 10th anniversary next year of doing the podcasts as well as in the shop at Backpacking Light. And I've been asking people if they have any suggestions or ideas, or if they'd like to join me wild camping, especially if they haven't done it before. And I've had a series of emails come through, and I'd just like to read a few of them and some of the comments, if I may. The first is Steve Riley. First of all, congratulations on your 10th anniversary. I've been listening to your podcast since episode 1. Wow, that's fantastic, Steve. Thanks. And it inspired me to convince my wife to walk Wainwright's Coast to Coast for our honeymoon in 2008. It was brilliant. Well, that's great. That's nice to hear that you've been listening for that long, and thank you so much for having that much patience. Another one is from Rich, a comment that he's put on the Outdoor Station website. Hi, Bob and Rhodes. Great episode, so many things to say. Great job taking a newbie wild camping, especially a lady. I've managed to inspire my wife and eldest daughter so far. 2 more daughters to go. Our 3 sons all keen now, and they are now tarp bivvy proponent, ages of 24, 14 and 12. Fantastic. You've been busy, haven't you, all those kids? Well, I'm sure there's plenty of bivvy bags in that household. Another one from Julia Freeman. Bob, would you like to join me for a wild camping trip down here in either Kent or Sussex? I'm based in Canterbury, and that puts me not far from the North Downs or South Downs or Greensands Way, as well as others. I'm a cyclist as well, and I've just converted my Brompton for touring use, so maybe that would be of interest. That sounds fantastic, Julia. Thanks for that. You're on my list, definitely, to follow that through. So hopefully sometime next year we'll be joining Julia for a Brompton-based wild camping trip. And finally, one from David Longley. First, to say that I'm super excited about the upcoming wild camping series. Second, I'd like to make some suggestions. How about some of the historical sites in your area, castles and such? I'd love to join you. I'd love it. Unfortunately, I can't afford the plane ticket. So another suggestion, why not bring the Wild Camp series to America? I'd love to show you our beloved Appalachians. The Foothills Trail is a mere 2 hours from my house, and another hour would bring us to the infamous and magical AT. So what do you say, Bob? Time for a trip to the States? Oh, I wish. Anyway, back to a windy night on top of the Malvern Hills. Thanks for your emails, folks. Keep them coming.
Oh, just checking my watch, and it's 2:30 a.m. And as you can probably hear, when the wind has dropped quite significantly, I checked the inside of the bivvy when I woke up a second ago. And thankfully it's nice and dry. I've forgotten what a good bivvy bag this was, actually. It's really great. It was very fun to have your first piece of exciting equipment. I'm still wearing everything and so on. I did notice, actually, when I switched off last time, as I sort of bedded down, my legs and feet were really, really warm. As I said, the clothing was dry and I just got straight into a sleeping bag. But it's been very difficult. In fact, it's what's made it difficult is how mild it is. So, although I'm still wearing everything, the sleeping bag's actually unclipped, and it's only the bottom part of my legs that's inside the sleeping bag. Everything else is just trying to vent. One of the important things, as I said at the very beginning, is not to get into the bag too hot and bothered, otherwise you start to swelter too quickly. I think basically it's just too mild and my feet are warm. Ooh, excuse me. Anyway, all quiet, no disturbances by animals or anything else. So I'm just sleeping on and off fitfully, as you do in circumstances like this. Otherwise, quite comfortable, really. Anyway, I better close my eyes and get back to it. I've just checked the watch at the time, and it's now 6:30, and the sky is still thick with obviously the grey mist, but there's a bit more light going on behind it, and I'm sure I would see a lovely dawn if it wasn't in a cloud. The visibility is now, as daylight starts to come through, probably 50 metres, something like that. But it's a bit disappointing that I've failed on rule 2 of waking up with a decent view. Having said that, obviously these things are potluck sometimes. Managed to have a fairly good night's sleep, actually. Only woke really a couple of times, I suppose. And reminded really just how simple this particular bivy bag is, this basic mummy shaped army one, but actually how very functional and quite comfortable it is, because it's a bit more roomy, obviously because its normal audience have got weapons and things inside it, so it's a bit more roomy than the modern day technical bivy bags. And I really don't know if there'd be much difference really between it's sort of an up-to-date one and this one. One of the key differences about mummy-shaped bivy bags generally tends to be that they don't have a waterproof base, so they have a breathable base. So consequently you tend to put your insulation mat on the outside of the bag. When it's a non-breathable waterproof base, the advice is to put the sleeping mat inside the bag. Having said all that, I could have put it inside the bag, but to be honest, I'm now sitting up, and that's the main thing. The main issue about having sleeping mats inside bags is that once they're there, they make it fairly rigid. So when you try and sit up, you're actually fighting against the actual mat that you're lying on. So I'm able to sit up now and have a look at the view and take in this glorious weather. And do what I need to do with the mat nicely beneath me, and I'm still insulating me from the ground. As I said, the whole purpose of the exercise with wild camping, and certainly with bivy bag and such like, is to leave no trace. And the only thing I've done really is flatten the grass behind this gorse bush, which I don't think anybody's going to be noticing for a while, because I'm about 20-30 metres away from the main path. So it'll just be the sheep that notice. Maybe they'll snuggle in afterwards on the warm spot. Certainly Ronald Turnbull, the guy who wrote the Book of the Bivvy, has got a lot to answer for the enjoyment, fun, thrill and experience of camping like this. I've tried bivvying before, and then I read his book, and certainly meeting Ronald, he's a very interesting character, and certainly if you ever get to read the Book of the Bivvy, it's a fascinating read and very amusing and extremely tongue-in-cheek. But there's a lot of little practical tips in there, chucked in there as well. For example, one of Ronald's tips is he doesn't bother with a cooker and such like. He will just take some custard creams with him, or a pork pie, rather than have any cooking gear, which does make a lot of sense in some respects. And he tends to use the facilities when he comes across them, which is quite useful, I guess. So as light really starts to appear, make things a little bit less ghost-like,
over the next 10 or 15 minutes. Certainly I know the sun's definitely up at 7 o'clock because it was yesterday morning. I will start to make my way along the hills and back to my car in a few hours' time and head home for a brew and a nice breakfast, I think. In actual fact, that reminds me, I've got a flask of tea in here. So where are we? Yes. And the bar. So what have we learned? Well, I think one thing I've forgotten, which would have been useful, is a rain cover or a roll-top sack that I could have put the rucksack into. Not because it rained, but because it's obviously been put on wet ground. And being on wet ground means that the sack itself has got a bit wet where it sits against my back, and that would have, well, obviously it's just not very pleasant sticking a wet sack on your back sometimes after these occasions. So that would have been useful. One of the items I didn't mention, which I am wearing and I'd love, is my possum hat. A hat made from possum fur. Gosh, it's warm. I'm trying to remember where I got it from. I think it was Chocolate Fish. Oh, it's lovely. It started off with oh, that's nice. Fairly tightish fit, I suppose, and it's got a loose knit to it, I guess. But as soon as I put it on, it's so warm. I'd say probably it's even warmer than fleece. And so, of course, to keep yourself warm in any sleeping bag or bivvy bag, it's good to keep your head warm, and that helps the rest of the body. So that's been good. But you know, as a little setup, I could quite happily go out in this without spending any more money, quite happily. So that's, as I say, just an old military bivvy bag, a 2-3 season down bag I've got, I suppose. It's an old one, probably 2 season really. I'm wearing all my clothes in it. It's obviously a fairly balmy night, as the weather forecast was 10 degrees last night. Up here it was probably, I'd say, 5-6 degrees, something like that. Had it got any colder, I would have put my insulation layer on. But I'm still just wearing a base layer, merino wool base layer, again Chocolate Fish, and my montane jacket. And I'm sitting here supping my tea, staring out at mist and gorse, which is pretty boring, really. So I'm going to enjoy my cup of tea and my topic, and get out in a second and put my shoes on, take a few photographs and head back. I managed to manage the night without having to get out to go to the loo, which is obviously beneficial in the sense that you lose all the heat that you've gathered inside the bag if you have to do that. So I didn't drink very much before I went to sleep. Anyway, I hope all that has been some use to you and of interest, and not too much of a waffle. If you're interested in wild camping and would like to join me, then please drop me a line either on info@theoutdoorstation.co.uk, or use the Facebook page. Join us on the Facebook page, or make some suggestions. I've had a few suggestions already, and that's been really, really good. So it'd be nice to see if anybody else is interested in trying it for the first time, and me recording their experience and see what they think. But this is the first one, and we'll change some of the bivvy equipment on the next one. We'll see how the weather goes, maybe use a tarp if we have to, and see how the journey and adventure unfolds of wild camping in a bivvy bag.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear more from our extensive free library, please visit the website at theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
You can now follow The Outdoor Station on Facebook, where we chat about each programme we produce, answer questions and discuss future productions. Why not join us there?
This podcast is produced and hosted by theoutdoorstation.co.uk.